So I'm probably going to be a little bit more quiet in this review than I usually am because my dad is sleeping and it's about 11 a.m. here and he just, came back from work. He's really tired, so I really can't speak as loudly as I used to. So if you can't hear me, crank up the volume and let's get the show on the road. So this is my review of The Clown at Midnight. This is basically the story where Joker reinvents himself after being shot by the fake cop in Batman and Son. He spent maybe like a couple of weeks now recovering from his injuries. His mind is like recalibrating and stuff. It's kind of like Doctor Who, where every time the Joker is sort of like regenerating himself, like that's the thing Grant Morrison introduced in Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. He basically introduced the idea that Joker is constantly reinventing himself to counter Batman, and that pretty much explains why he's written so differently by every single writer. And he is going through something very similar to the Doctor Who regeneration. He suffered, some pretty big injuries, and his mind is sort of recalibrating. It's sort of going past and reliving all of his other versions and stuff, and it's creating this new version that's going to stay throughout the entire Grant Morrison run, and the one who's going to stay until his face gets cut off by the Dollmaker in Detective Comics #1, before he reinvents himself again for Death of the Family. Now, I really didn't like this because this is written in prose. And prose writing is basically a book with a few images here and there to, give you some vague hint as to how the things are supposed to look like. But it's pretty much just a book with a couple of pictures thrown in there. And if this was a story that really needed to be told in prose, I would be fine with it. But I have two problems. The first problem is that Grant Morrison cannot write descriptions well at all. His descriptions are just too long-winded. They're too full of metaphors and allegories and all that kind of stuff that it just gets on your nerves. Like, there's this one part that really sticks out in my mind where he's describing like broken down tree, not broken, you know those creepy looking trees that have no leaves on them and they look like they're just gonna keel over and drop to the ground any second, and he spends like half of a goddamn chapter just describing these things. Like, they look like a broken hooker who spent 50 years on the job, or it looks like a broken down sedan at the side of a road. And he has like 50 fucking allegories for a dilapidated tree, and I'm just like, wow, dude, you really have no idea how the hell to write descriptions. And that's the big problem with this. This had no reason to be in prose. Like, if this was just a standard comic book, it would be infinitely better. As it is, it's a pretentious script. Like a lot of people want to say that Grant Morrison is pretentious, but this, and I don't usually agree with that at all. But here he just is so fucking pretentious. He just has to throw in so many comparisons to other things. He just has to throw in all this needless stuff in the descriptions of things. It just makes no goddamn sense. Like, this really didn't need to be in prose. This really needed to just be a standard comic book issue with the artist who did the art in the form the comic book is right now. The artist should have just done the entire issue, and it would have been fine, and it would have pretty much spared us of all the goddamn descriptions, because this really didn't need to be in prose. And the way he writes descriptions is just atrocious. It's a pain in the ass. It's not enjoyable at all, and I just couldn't help myself but skip through every time he like went into a description. Like, there's a whole fucking chapter where he like describes Gotham, and it just goes on and on and on and on. It never ends. On the flip side, I will say that the dialogue is really, really good. I think the dialogue is just absolutely fantastic. It's just, I really can't say anything else about the dialogue. I mean, it's just so good. Batman sounds like Batman. Harley Quinn sounds appropriate like Harley Quinn. The beginning scene in the graveyard where Joker's former henchmen are like burying their old boss, who basically told them that the Joker is like genocide, and if you want to delay the genocide, you gotta keep him laughing, and the second he gets bored of you or he stops laughing, you're pretty much fucked. I thought descriptions like that were done exceptionally well, and I wish Grant Morrison spent more time devoted to that kind of dialogue or to those kinds of descriptions instead of forcing 50 fucking allegories on how a dilapidated tree can compare to a car or to a hooker. But this issue is really kind of pointless, and like you do get like we have never seen how the Joker basically sort of regenerates himself, Doctor Who style. We never actually see how he does it, like what is his mind like when he's doing this kind of thing. And we do get that in this issue, and there is this hilarious bit where he's like listing off the things he loves, like he has gutted fish, racism, AIDS, and probably my favorite, and this is morbidly funny, where he basically says one of the things he loves is like exceptional geniuses with irreparable brain damage. Oh god, I thought that was hilarious. And that bit where you're actually seeing him transform himself into the Joker that's going to be later on in Grant Morrison's run is actually really fascinating. And him going around and killing all of these other guys was also actually pretty good, because the thing with Joker is that he has to sever ties with his other selves when he is basically transforming himself into a different version of himself, and so he's going around killing all of these surviving gang members until Harley Quinn's the only one left, and he tries to kill her too. He doesn't love her anymore, and Batman basically stops him. And there's a kind of a continuity problem with this whole idea, is that if he constantly is reinventing himself and he's constantly cutting all ties to the past, wouldn't he have killed Harley like a long time ago if this is something he's been doing ever since he first showed up in Gotham? That's kind of a continuity snafu right there that I noticed. And another thing I gotta mention is the few pictures that are there are really creepy. They're really disturbing. They fit the mood of the book very, very well. And I just wish that guy just drew the whole thing. Like I said, this issue's whole problem is that it didn't need to be in prose. Like if this was just drawn with the creepy art that's already here in the finished product, it would have been a fantastic issue as it is. All of the great, like, inner workings of the Joker stuff that was going on could have just put it in narration captions or like thought bubbles or stuff. All the dialogue that's great could have been kept, and really this being in prose is absolutely the worst thing Grant Morrison possibly could have done. It absolutely destroys what could have been a fantastic issue. And in the end, despite the whole Joker transforming himself scene being really awesome and all the dialogue being really good and the imagery that's there being, genuinely freaky and disturbing, I really can't recommend that you guys check this out. I mean, if you're a comic book reader, you already know the idea that Joker reinvents himself every time he constantly reinvents himself to counter Batman, to keep Batman on his toes. And if you already know this, there's absolutely no reason for you to read this. This is entirely pointless if you know that idea, and if you're a new reader that's getting into Batman and you're starting with the trade of Batman and Son, which this is a part of, you're probably going to hate this issue simply because it's not in the standard comic book format. So this book really doesn't have an audience at all, unless you're someone who can really tolerate these really pretentious, overblown, and just completely unnecessarily long descriptions. Then you're going to probably like this. But as an average Joe who really hates it when a writer spends half the fucking book describing shit that doesn't matter in the overall plot, and then tries to, make himself sound smarter than everybody else by using, big words and allegory and all that shit just to make the issue more pretentious, I guess, then I don't even know what to score this. Like, I honestly tell you, the only thing you need to know about this issue is the Joker reinvents himself, and he's kind of like this Hannibal Lecter serial killer, and that's pretty much it. There is absolutely no reason for anyone to read this comic book. It's not accessible to new readers. Experienced Batman readers already know the idea of Joker reinventing himself, so this book's entire existence is entirely pointless, and its execution is piss poor, in my opinion. So yeah, this is easily the weakest thing he's done on the book. I really hope Three Ghosts of Batman picks this up, because this really just wasn't a good time, and I just found myself bored out of my mind while reading this. So yeah, skip this. It's not essential at all, and I don't recommend anyone reading it. So yeah,